it's great to see all you here at campus, and also there's quite many participants also there online in Zoom. And my name is Outi Tapio-Mäntylä, and I'm head of our research unit, teachers, teaching and educational communities. And you are all so warmly welcome to come to this book launch event, which is organized by our unit and also our research unit and also the research community. And the book which is launched today is called Barad as Educator and written by Professor Karin Murris, who is the professor of the early childhood education here in our university at the University of Oulu. And also here is our guest, Professor Jane Osgood. You are so warmly welcome also, and it is a pleasure to meet you. And she is the co-editor of the series in which this book is published. And first, I will introduce you. And Jane Osgood, she is a professor of childhood studies at the Center of Education Research and Scholarship in the Middlesex University. And she's very well known in early childhood education research circles, and her work addresses issues of social justice through critical engagement with policy and curricular frameworks and pedagogical approaches in early childhood education. And she is also committed to extending understanding of workforce, families, gender, and sexualities, the child and the childhood in the early years context through creative and effective methodologies. And she has published over 100 publications in form of books, chapters, journals, papers, and she is the co-editor of the Gender Education Journal, and she is also the book series editor of Bloomsbury and Springer. So welcome again. Then I also introduce our Professor Karin Murris. Like I mentioned before, that she is our early childhood education professor here in our university, but she is also emerita professor of pedagogy and philosophy in University of Cape Town. And she is the teacher educator and grounded in academic philosophy and post-qualitative research paradigm. And her main interests are in post-human child studies and philosophy in education and digital play and ethics and democratic pedagogies. So this was very brief introduction to you both, and now I think it's time to hear about this new book. And please welcome Jane. The floor is yours.
Okay, well, firstly, thank you very much for that incredibly warm welcome. It's really wonderful to actually be somewhere other than my study and in the flesh with real people in a real room, which is quite a strange but very welcome whole new experience. I don't want to take up too much space. I want to firstly extend my appreciation to you all for having me here and just say how thrilled I am that this book is now in the world. And I just wanted to take a little bit of time to tell you about the book series itself and how Karin's book sits within that series, because I think it is quite an important history and quite an important political narrative to share with you all. So I want to start by just giving you a kind of very brief overview of the Springer Briefs Key Thinkers in Education series, which is published by Springer. And it was established in 2013, so it's been going a good long while, and it was under the custodianship of Professor Paul Gibbs, who recently retired. And there are over 30 volumes in the series, and it covers a wide range of key thinkers, key philosophers from Kant to Foucault to Spinoza, lots of white men. And this is where my intervention, if you like, or the reason I was invited to become part of this project was to to extend the range and scope and the representation of feminist thinkers amongst those key thinkers in education. So the format of the series is intended that each book is very accessible. That doesn't mean they're easy reads because they are dense philosophy, but they are intended to offer the reader an invitation into that key philosopher's ideas about education, how it's been taken up, how it's been applied in practice. And so the format is typically it's a very slim volume. Size one, and this one is slim and bitten into. But typically they have around 5 chapters, and the chapters are intended to obviously form a book because they do, but they also serve another purpose, that each chapter is a standalone entity in and of itself. And it's possible, if you're so inclined, to purchase just one chapter, and that would be nourishing enough. But if you've got a real appetite, then you can buy the whole book. They're available in ebook and in paperback. So they're designed to be very accessible, and you can have them as ebooks, so they can be downloaded, they can be part of a university package. So they're intended to be useful and to be used by you in your practice to really bring philosophy to life. So as I said at the beginning, there is quite a plethora of white men in the series, and Paul Gibbs and Springer recognised that that was something of an issue that needed addressing. Hence my invitation to become part of the editorial team and to seek to remedy that in some ways by inviting feminist scholars to write about feminist philosophers and their work, and the profound difference that has made to education, which is not always appreciated or celebrated. And so that's been my mission since I took up the post a couple of years ago. So it's really about the editor, me, the author, the philosophers. Let's get some feminist thought up there, out there, because it's so crucially important. Yeah, I'll say a little bit more about inviting submissions in a sec. But I just want to say, well, I'll just say it again, but it is about increasing the feminist presence in this series. It's so important that that is kept on the agenda. And when I came to the series, there were these 4 very important and very useful volumes, Deborah Britzman, Hannah Arendt, Margaret Mead and Melanie Klein. And they're great books, but that's only 4 in 30+ volumes. Now we have Karen Barad amongst that collection. So we're edging in the right direction, and that's my mission for the series. So I'm not going to say too much about this volume because I'm going to leave Karen to do that work. But just to say, I couldn't be more thrilled. When Karen accepted my invitation, I explained to her my mission, my goal, the kind of feminist political project I'd set myself. She jumped, I think, very enthusiastically at the invitation and set to work immediately. And for a scholar so steeped in a philosopher's work, such as Karen Barad, I don't think it was an enjoyable task for you. So it was consolidating and bringing together much work that you've been doing over many years. And I think Barad, and there's a real appetite for this book because Barad is one of the most cited philosophers, particularly in early childhood education, but not only childhood education. And they are very difficult. Really nuanced, sophisticated, challenging philosophy to get your head, body, mind around. And this book is needed. And already I know that a number of my PhD students are just rejoicing that this is now in the world and will make their life so much easier to navigate a way in and to recognise the value of philosophy in practice. And yeah, these kind of key concepts and practices, you provide some really lucid, very engaging and very practical examples of how these very complex concepts actually can be mobilized in educational research and within education. So I think a huge amount here. It's incredibly generous of you actually to put, you know, your work into this tiny volume that's just so rich and so full of so much promise, and will be, I know, will be so helpful to so many people. And I think the other thing that really comes out very, very strongly in the volume is your relationship to Karen Barad, and the in real time relationship and connection you have with them, their work, the visits that they made to your university, the difference they've made, their work has made to your students and entire communities of scholars, and that's so, so important. So I've said everything there, I think. So just to say that there is a discount for the book. This is the link. I think it's going in chat as well. And this is the code, and it's available in ebook, as I say, ebook, softback, or individual chapters. But this code will entitle you to a reduction in price. And just finally, to say that I'm hoping that this is going to be the start of something amazing, that other feminist scholars will take heed of what's possible, and recognise the importance and the value of celebrating feminist philosophy and feminist scholarship in educational circles. So I have several volumes in my own mind, and I'm in negotiation with a number of potential authors and actual authors, this far away from signing contracts with some of them. But I'm open to suggestions, I'm open to hearing from others. So if there are people out there in here who have a book in the waiting inside them, then please get in touch. My email's at the bottom there. But I just want to finish my little contribution here by just saying I couldn't be more thrilled to have this book in the series. It feels like a huge, huge accomplishment, and I'm just so grateful to you. So I'm not going to take up any more space, but to hand the floor to you, Karen, and tell us more. Thanks.
Wow, thank you. Thanks so much, Jane. But first of all, Oti, for your very warm welcome. And yeah, and for my colleagues, friends to be here and also in Zoom. And I'm actually quite moved by a very generous introduction. And yeah, I was very enthusiastic, but also absolutely terrified and very honored when I was invited to write the book. But also, first of all, I thought, me, what? Are you sure? I thoroughly enjoyed it, but also, you know, when you write, and all of you here in the room and in the Zoom room will know that when you have those ideas, that it feels okay when they're just in your living room or your bedroom or your study or wherever you're writing. And I would dare say in my mind, because it's much more than that, and as you walk and swim. But then when other people, Winnie the Pooh says, you know, when other people start looking at it, then it gets quite scary. So I'm just waiting for more responses to come my way. I've already had some emails, actually from people who read the book before I'd even seen it myself. So that was really, really exciting. But I'm very excited about this series. That's also why I said yes, for all the reasons, the important feminist reason for turning this series into a much more gender balanced series, not only by the authors, but also by the philosophers that, as we know, are there too, but where are they in the world in terms of being published? Of course, I need to, the way I thought of talking is that it's a little bit different from what I normally do. I tend not to read, but what I have chosen to do is read a little bit from the first 2 chapters of the book, and then say a little bit about the last 2 and how it sort of functions. But occasions like this, you always have to do a series of thank yous. So I will do those thank yous too. I want to thank Nick Melchior, especially from Springer, for making this possible. Especially the University of Oulu for generously supporting me in my research, not just this research, all research, and especially living relations colleagues who are also here making this possible with the technology, and much more so through their friendship and through their collegiality. Then so this living relations, our research group, but also the TTEC, which is the larger research unit. So thank you also for this generous space. My scholarship also still greatly benefits from my colleague and through my colleagues in South Africa, and in particular through the National Research Foundation of South Africa. And there's still one funded project that is still going on, and what I've written is it worked its way through the book all the time and will continue to do so. And all my writing is also generously edited and supported by my husband, linguist, who tirelessly always looks at my publications, and I'm very grateful for him for doing so. English is not my first language. Okay, so a few more. Is it this one or that one? I actually don't know. Is it this one here? Okay. So this book actually would never have been possible without the slow reading groups that Viv Bozelek and myself started in 2015. So we actually still go on 3 times every week for an hour, and we do this very, very slow reading, and most of the time that is Karen Barad's books, writings, and it is not necessarily meant that way, but this is how it is evolved and continues in a very democratic way. We just decide as a research group. If you're interested in joining us, you're very welcome. People from all over the world actually join us. And the details are in what is on the website, is the Decolonizing Early Childhood Discourse website. And this is one of the projects that was funded by the NRF, and we still have one as Post-Qualitative Research Collective, which is also funded by the National Research Foundation of South Africa. Now, why is that also important? And you see some of my colleagues here at the bottom on this slide. Was that a part of the Decolonizing Early Childhood Discourses was a visit by Karen Barad, and you already mentioned that. And they asked whether they could come and do a 2-day seminar with us. And we thought, what? Yes, yes, you don't have to ask, please do come. And it was the most unforgettable experience, which continues to work its way through the scholarship of so many people in South Africa. And we actually just completed a book manuscript, which we have submitted to Karen and to 3 people endorsing the book. And so we just hope that all is fine, and then we submit it to Routledge at the end of this month. So that is the title, In Conversation with Karen Barad, and it is with 12 chapters. It's about the contributions, or the contributions are from especially PhD researchers and colleagues whose scholarship has been profoundly changed by that particular seminar. But it's also for people in education and in higher education. It is how the seminar was organized, the pedagogies very much informed by agential realism. So Karen Barad's scholarship is not just about, how we teach, although it does. It's not just about how we research, but how these two are actually never separated and completely untangled. So of course, after this event that is never finished, I moved here, and it still feels very strange. It was just when COVID started 2 years ago, and I started my new job in April 2020 when I arrived here, completely at the other side of the world. And of course, the pandemic had just started, and it has been very challenging at times, but it also has had so many highlights. And one of the highlights was last year in the autumn, when Malou Yurskia and came to do a doctorate research seminar with the PhD researchers here, which again profoundly changed a lot of what I thought I knew about agential realism. And I can't recommend too highly the book Dialogues on Agential Realism that Malou and her colleagues edited. And it was just amazing to host Malou here. So thanks also to the University of Oulu to make that possible, and to work with her, and all the other experiences of just being with her and hanging out with Malou, which was incredible. And Astrid Schrader's lecture also profoundly changed me and the way I analyze data. So what I would like to do now is say a little bit about, just quote or read a little bit from the book. And that is not accidental on the top. So I just taken a few out. This book is not about Karen Barad. It's not biographical. Instead, oh, that's where the camera is. Instead, the book gestures towards an important decentering of the human subject, both Barad as a person, as well as a decentering of me, the subject, the author of this book. Karen's Facebook profile, as you can see it here in the image, is a constellation, and it articulates multiple temporalities like stars in the night sky, although not always in Finland. Night sky is not always dark, but anyway, in most places. So in the night sky, stars, some are alive, some are dead, but they're still visible to the human eye. The image, without a human face, shows powerfully the agential realist reconfiguration of the human, including Karen Barad themselves. In an email conversation, Karen writes that they were thrilled by how their photo had worked out. And by diffracting it through the letters Karen Barad, the image articulates the lively and dynamic naturalist ontology of agential realism. The moon shines on, I quote, the world's radical aliveness. And I quote, in an entirely non-traditional way, reworks the nature of both relationality and aliveness, vitality, dynamism, agency. This quote is from Barad's incredibly influential and only monograph to date, Meeting the Universe Halfway, Quantum Physics and the Entanglement of Matter and Meaning. It's increasingly a key resource for post-humanist, new materialist and post-qualitative researchers. And, you know, you already mentioned that, Jane, the incredible influence that they're having on the fields, various fields, very transdisciplinary work. But also the only, and how quantity and quality and what we value in academia is we have to produce a lot and more and more and more. And how a lot of what agential realism is about is disrupting, and it is a staying with. Barad says about their own book that it's not so much that, I quote, I've written this book, as it has written me. Or rather, we have interactively written each other, thereby reworking both what a book is and an author is. These are mind, or maybe body mind-boggling mind ideas that go against centuries of ingrained Western habits of thought and require much unlearning as a way of learning. Unlearning, in fact, what education continues to teach. So if this book is not biographical about Barad, what is it about? And why does it matter? As a porous, diffracted body, Karen Barad as Educator is my interactive reading of Barad's philosophy physics, as well as their enacted pedagogical practices in higher education, in particular as articulated in their later writings. So the book aims to provide a gripping account, an unusual opportunity for educators, I hope, in the broad sense of the word educator, to be inspired by the invigorating and elusive philosophy of agential realism. This book, in fact, speaks to anyone who's interested in the what and the how of educational encounters and who's interested in alternatives to the dominant neoliberal national curricula, educational policies, and humanist teaching, research, and conference agendas. Its structure troubles a self-present subject, a singular, separate I. It is woven together through knots. Knots knit together, forge and sustain relations. They unfold and connect. The different knots in each chapter work diffractively, like waves overlapping, not progressively. There are no key arguments that run from the beginning to the end in straight lines. There is no linear logic that explains each concept before introducing the next. On the other hand, they are not randomly placed either. Each knot is in chapters with clear threads. You can start with it, yet it also follows on from what has gone before it. The knots are not things, but waves, bodies without determinate boundaries. In coming together, they're more than the sum of their parts, creating superpositions. Reading this book might be more like swimming or surfing or hopping than cycling or walking. This book is not about transmitting and informing the reader about the right way of reading Karen Barad's agential realism, a truth to follow, a theory to embrace, leading to the right way of teaching or doing education research. Droughts, freshwater shortage, storms and floods have become dramatically more commonplace. With ice caps melting, chronic diseases, contaminations and pandemics as the global order of the day, it is becoming increasingly clear that these environmental crises do not affect all lives in the same way, nor have they been produced equally. The 4 chapters diffracted through one another constitute an educational response to these crises. How might we as educators respond responsibly to Barad and to each other, differently aged humans and other than human? How can this academic intimacy touch the right nerve, materially and discursively, to urgently imagine other ways of doing education more inhumane and without the Western dichotomies already in place that keep nature at a distance? What are the crutches for education when undoing the power-producing binaries that have crippled how humans relate to each other in education and to the other than human? How can Karen Barad as educator help us reimagine a non-violent world in all its materiality that is a bit easier to love? Oh, it's very powerful. It actually makes me think of some amazing artwork that Living Relations Group were doing this morning before lunch. Agential realism pulls the rug out from under established assumptions about human agency, causality, intentionality, and voice. It draws our attention to the philosophical assumptions and binaries that are already in place in educational practices before teaching or research projects get off the ground. Karen Barad invites us to walk around in our conceptual distinctions, continually rethinking and redoing our concepts and practices. The book's main aim is to offer imaginaries for radically decolonizing educational futures without prescription, romanticizing, or moralizing. In a recent talk, Barad comments how, I quote, "Sedimented ways of thinking are so deep that we hardly question them anymore, both in physical theories, but also in political theories. They suggest that," I quote, "it is not about finding something pure, but to keep the questions moving, by always asking the prior question. Now, the chapters in this volume take up this exciting challenge as an open invitation for justice to come. Justice is not a state or an endpoint that can be achieved once and for all. We should take it to heart, as Barad puts it, I quote, "There's only the ongoing practice of being open and alive to each meeting, each interaction, so that we might use our ability to respond, our responsibility to help awaken, to breathe life into ever new possibilities for living justly. The world and its possibilities for becoming are remade in each meeting." Karen Barad lives their philosophy of physics. They are not just modeled as a theoretical example for us to copy. Every one of us needs to do that work in our own way and responsibly in our everyday life as academics, as education researchers, teachers in schools and universities, and as people. There are no founding fathers or mothers to follow, to copy, or to emulate. In that sense, we are all epistemological orphans, Rosie Bradotti would say, and homeless nomadic subjects. But we are not alone. Other earthlings, large and small, are the condition of our existence. There is no measure of scale that precedes our interactions. So these are parts from basically the first two chapters of the book. And in chapter 3 and 4, and in chapter 3, I work extensively with this image from Zuko of data that was at the heart of this project, Children, Technology and Play, that I run with this amazing group of researchers, and of course has very much benefited from our conversations. And we are also actually in the process of writing a book called Post-Digital Play. And thank you, Teresa Giosa, Kieran Dixon, Joanne Pierce, and Shanique Lawrence for the amazing conversations that have also helped to meet Zuko in a particular way. So there's that meeting that very much has inspired, and the notion of meeting in agential realism is how I read the data. So this image of Zuko. I won't say more about, I will just give you a flavor, and then hopefully you will read the book. And in chapter 4, which is called Diffraction as Childlike Methodology. So diffraction, of course, is a methodology that is very much a post-humanist special agential realism, and inspired by Donna Haraway and Gloria Anzaldúa and Mintrin Ha and Karen Barad. And I diffract through that and call it a childlike methodology. And in this last chapter, I know, of course, I talk about why that is the case. And the example that I work with extensively is one from a master's course I teach here with Ture Tommy on ethics and politics in education. And we work with guest lecturers. And one of the guest lecturers last year was Karen Malone. And she was sharing this video of a meeting of a fish and her granddaughter in an aquarium. Anyway, we work and I show in the book the way that we worked with the students, and that is very much in Karen Barad's later work, is where they share how agential realism has very much informed the way that they teach at the moment. And we've been experimenting really beautifully with that, I think, with our students, I hope. And so you can read about that in the last chapter, and especially the way in which we worked with the students as we were meeting in this encounter of the fish and the child, we also provoked the students to imagine what questions the glass would have. So what were the questions, when we think about the prior questions, that agential realism really provokes us to ask, not only what is the fish, what are the fish questions might be, what the child's questions might be, but also what the glass questions might be. And then we finished by doing a communal choir, which worked incredibly well in Zoom, where we started with expressing our how it affected, how this video affected us, and Ture, in an amazing way, turned that into a sound choir. And if you want to listen to that choir, you have to read the book. So if you would like to find out more about my work, my research, I would like to invite you to my website. It was finished actually this week by my amazing research assistant and web designer, Anneke Slabbert, and I can't thank her enough for all the support that she gives me in my everyday, almost, sorry, Anneke, everyday existence as an academic, and her supportive role in this. The image is from Nabila Kiddy from Malawi, an ex-student of mine in South Africa. And Anneke has done the most amazing job in bringing this image alive through the website. So it just leaves me to thank you all for attending the event, either on Zoom or in the room. And I think it's time for coffee. Is that right? What a timing! No, no. But there is also opportunity to ask questions. I know that there is still it's 22:03, so people might want to say something or do something. There's also coffee that has arrived, and sorry for people, I don't know where to look or here, sorry for people in the room. But there might also be questions from people in Zoom. It is, well, it's simple, it's baradmurus.com. Yeah, baradmurus.com. And I just hope, if I've forgotten to thank anybody, then I hope I haven't, but yeah, it's I don't know whether
can we, it's possible.
Yes, yeah. So definitely we should book it, should order it, but also it will be possible to purchase different chapters of it, because that's also what I like. And that was quite a challenge in the writing of it, is that it had to be able to stand alone. So you have to do some kind of repetition of, although I say there is no argument running through, there is a kind of coherence still. And that it doesn't become too repetitive if people read it as a whole book, although I'm not sure how many academics have time to read a whole book in one go these days, but yeah. But I think the setup is really nicely done. And I suppose it models a little bit structure of PhD research here as well, where you work with, say, 3 or 4 papers, and then you write something around it. So, it's actually quite a nice structure. But what I try to do is, so there's an introduction to each of those chapters, but then there are everything that is called on something, on agency, on causality, etc., can be read separately if it's relevant for your particular research, for example. Yeah.
There are some messages for you.
Okay. Okay. So, hey. Okay. So these are all thank you. I don't think that questions. Yeah. And thank you, Anneke, for putting the website in there. Yeah.
Thanks.
Or comments.
Oh, there's a
Yes. Yes, Teresa. That's a very, very good question. So Teresa is asking, do you feel sad that the book is now in a fixed form? You see, and I think one of the things that I have to learn and unlearn and keep learning and unlearning is the idea that there is such a thing as the letter, and that only has one meaning. So that in the returning, even my returning, and so it might be when Karen Barad did the seminar with us, I was so disappointed when they got the diffraction paper out, which I'd already had read like 10 times, and then was going to read it. But it was during that seminar that I started to realize that that was a performance, that the returning is not just, again, just out loud of letters that are fixed, or at least have fixed meanings, but that it is always already new in the moment. It's iterative, always a reworking. And that in doing that, in the same way that the returning to the image of Zuko, it becomes richer and deeper and more complex, and it generates more questions each time in your returning. And I think that is so sad when, as academics, we think we just have to, we have to move on to another paper, and the paper has to be about something else, rather than that constant staying with. And of course, Donna Haraway says staying with the trouble. So I don't know whether it does justice to your very good question, Teresa. Okay, great. Maybe someone can read them out. Oh, wait a minute.
Always very struck by the integration of your teaching, research, and writing. This in itself is worthy of further exploration and innovation, says John Hicks.
Yeah, so thank you. Let me stay with that for a minute. And yeah, it still surprises me all the time how teaching and research is separated out. And that when we talk about research as educators, we don't only talk about researching our teaching as a practice, but that pedagogical theories themselves are always, the pedagogies in practice are an enactment of those theories at the very same time. And so that one doesn't go with the other. And in radio media philosophy, they talk about theory and practice like two pedals on the same bike. And I really do like that metaphor very much, also because it is about movement and it's in its materiality, but you can't run without the other. And I keep bumping into that. Was also when I wanted to post, is worth mentioning, when I wanted to post or announce this event on one of the lists that would go to PhD researchers across all departments, that it was like, no, this is only about education. So in other words, the educators, so the people that teach, that lecture in other departments wouldn't benefit from Karam's scholarship, and it couldn't be further from the truth. So I think, you know, as a faculty, we're actually an interfaculty. You know, we inform all the other educators in higher education. And I think also to say that, and when I talk about childlike methodology, is that how, no, now I lost the thread. Oh, it will come back. Thank you so much, Karen. I have the book and we'll read this weekend. I wonder if you could say something about touch. There is no index, and I'm doing a temporal diffraction on sounding bodies and think power in the context of making with music. Can you suggest where to go to read about touch and the composition of post-human bodies? Massive gratitude for this exquisite jewel of a book. Well, there is actually an article, Pam, that Barad has written about touch. So I can highly recommend. So if you, I wouldn't know the top of my head what it's called. Maybe if someone does, can put it in the chat. But actually touch is in the title of the article. And so just Barad and touch. And it's a very complex topic because obviously as a concept, it is reconfiguring touch as not something that is only at human scale, but by disrupting both micro and macro scales. What does that mean in terms of touch? But we could have a conversation about that, Pam, because it's, yeah, deeply complex, very interesting, and probably one of the hardest of, I think, of the theory to grapple with, but very worthwhile. And in the about music, there's some about that in the fourth one, and how to work diffractively through these different languages of teaching, learning, research. So working in particular with other languages than words, and I know, of course, music does that, and also staying with the fact that a lot of that we cannot articulate, some of it not even aware of in its complexity. I agree with you, Karen. I think it's also feminist. I know that was a potential part of an interaction with it sometime. Therese is responding to, oh yeah. I agree with you, Karen. I think it's also a feminist issue, sure. Can you take us more about your take on how Barad thinks with Derrida? Okay, so that's very much about the way, especially in later work, and I think Astrid Schrader's influence as a PhD researcher with Karen Barad has been very profound. I can again refer back to the book on dialogues on agential realism, and in particular Astrid's a chapter on it and the whole idea of the moving. But Derrida is already in Karen Barad's 2007 book, some of the influence, but of course not in a humanist way. Although Derrida is deeply misunderstood, as Jacques Derrida himself says in an interview with Sisu, and I write about that in chapter 4. But how, when we think about ontology and epistemology, and some of you might be familiar with the phrase, you know, as space-time mattering and onto epistemo ethics, you know, and putting those together, and how by putting them together and how important the hyphen is, it's disruption also of the concept of being, of that something just is, so that when even now in this moment where we are now, that the past and future are already bleeding through this now. And so that although we might not be aware of it with our human senses, that the world is a much more complex and a much richer one than just the one that we can perceive. So hauntology, so from ontology to hauntology, is very much influenced by Jacques Derrida's work. But there's also a very interesting way in which Jacques Derrida talks about child and childlike, And it is that I pick up and diffract through in the 4th chapter, but it would be too long to actually do justice to it, although I can pick it up. It hasn't got an index, Pam, because the way of this book has been composed, not just the book itself, but the series as 4 separate chapters that somehow hang together. There it is, thank you. On touching the inhuman, that therefore I am differences. And when I was sort of hesitating in reading out inhuman, I was also inhuman, and the slash, the forward slash, is a deliberate disrupting of the binary. It's a cutting together apart. It's not a Cartesian cut. So when we say inhuman, it is not that we want to remove the human. Posthumanism is not a beyond the human. It is a troubling how we have figured or configured the human and want to reconfigure it. And to what extent already in the human, the concept of human itself, are particular notions of time. And this in childhood studies, child studies is so important, because the whole linear time, a unilinear time and space as a container, a Newtonian container, is completely already contained within the concept of the human. And that's why we have children and we've got adults, because of the kind of assumptions that we take for granted. And it's here where we have to do this deep constructive work. And I can highly recommend an article, a chapter actually in a book, Entangled Matters. And we're reading that on a Wednesday, if you're interested, called What Flashes Up, where we work with Walter Benjamin's notion of deconstruction. And for people familiar with Derrida, you'll know that deconstruction is in there too. But it is troubling, it is constantly, and it is not just semantics, you know, these kind of, the play with words is a constant unlearning, in the same way that I don't talk about capital I throughout this book. But as I already did in 2016, and sometimes if I dare to continue to do, is that I talk about I, and not printed like in with black ink, but more in gray ink, just to not just actually to reconfigure the individual bounded body that is then interacting with others, but instead really troubling the idea that we are bounded bodies, which we know you just have to put a microscope to our skin and then we see a lot of very aliveness going on that we sometimes prefer not to know. But they are us too, you know, they're not alien to us. Okay, Barad Nerds Assemble. Okay, I don't know that. Okay.
I think, yeah, we have.
Yeah.
Thanks, Barry. Thank you all for very nice. I hope I haven't, I don't think I've missed a question or comment. Thank you, very, very kind messages and your congratulations. Maybe you can save the chat before we shut down. It would be lovely just to. Thank you, Roseanne. Congratulations on this work. Congratulations. Congratulations, Karen Barad, you're a legend. Yeah, completely entangled with this, and maybe they are in the room. We had it once with our reading group that was then live on Facebook. That it was another research assistant I had then, and she said, "Oh, Karen Barad is actually listening to us in the reading group." We're like, oh. Yeah, because and I think that is something that I really meant when I was saying that, and I've written that down as well, is that they really live it, you know, and meeting Karen Barad is such a reminder of what it means to live a feminist life and a philosophical life too. and the challenge. And yeah, something that we have to continuously do and remind ourselves. And that's a real challenge, but it's also an opportunity. Thank you. Okay, is that? I hope it's not too hard.
Hi, Karen. Can you hear me? You can't hear me.
Yes.
No.
Where are you? Can I see you?
Hi.
Oh, wonderful. Have you been here all the way through?
No, I didn't realize that 2 o'clock was 1 o'clock here, so I've
Oh,
been
no.
supervising. So I just, I thought I had time, that time was coming, but time had already been.
Talking about time,
Yes,
but Malou, it has been recorded, so we can send the recording to you. And
great.
I just so applaud our, the influence that your seminar had on the writing, and not just the seminar, but just the being together. And and it's great to see you. Yeah, but I definitely will send you. And of course, Roseanne was also in that seminar. And at the seminar with Karen Barad.
Great.
Yeah, lovely to see you both.
Yeah, you too. Hope to see you in Copenhagen.
Yes, no, I definitely, I'm so glad I wasn't dreaming. So I will respond to your, I was going to do it early this morning, and then I thought, no, I'll take some time on Sunday, but I will respond. Yeah, we'll see each other in Copenhagen. Okay, take care. Thank you.
Too.
Bye.
Have a lovely weekend. Bye.
Yeah, you too. Bye. Bye, Roseanne. Bye, Simon.
Well done. Congratulations.
Bye, Norma. Lovely that you were there. Bye, Teresa. Bye.
Bye.
Great to see you.
Bye. Thanks again. Be well. Looking forward to seeing you
Hi, Norma.
sometime.
Yes, thank you. Shame you're not here.
Yeah. Goodbye.
Okay, bye.
Hello, Karen.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, and you?
Yes, I am. Fantastic.
I've been driving. I've been driving in my car, so I haven't been able to contribute at all. But just to say, I have stopped now. Just to say congratulations, and I can't wait to read this book. It sounds amazing.
Oh, thank you. And on this website, we haven't got the student research projects and the PhD, not yet, but it will be there. Your stuff will be there soon.
Oh, lovely. No, I'm looking forward to having a look at it. I'll go online this evening and check out your website. But yeah, well done, Karen. And your work is just incredible. I can't wait to dive in.
Oh, thank you.
All the best.
And drive carefully.
Bye-bye. Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi, Karen. I joined the
Hi, Samaya. Good to see you. All
Good
from
to
South
see
Africa.
huge congratulations. I'm glad I'm going to have another book to add to my collection of books. So just to say that, huge congrats again, and I hope you're doing well, and I hope that we can catch up soon.
Yeah, Will, are you completely better now?
Completely. Still got a bit of the residual cough. I don't know, for some reason, could be worse than others, but up and about and running around. So when you have some free time, or I'll message you and then we can just see when we can meet up.
Yeah, we make time. After this, I've got more time.
Okay, great stuff. But again, huge congrats and big hugs to you, Karen. I'm so proud that you're my supervisor. And
You
you've done
were,
all the
don't
work.
forget that I couldn't have done this with all of you, hey?
Well, I mean, I love how we are so entangled through space and time, hey, with all our work. It's just, I've learned so much from you. I continue to learn from you. So yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for the book. I think it's so needed. And I can't wait to dive in.
Thanks.
I'm gonna also
Okay.
hi, Karen, and just saying that this is the start, because we need to read the book so that we can really engage. And I know that you're going to be doing some really interesting, innovative, creative ways of us engaging with it. So I'm looking forward to what this book is going to continue to mean. So just to say thank you. And I know you want to get off to coffee with the people in the room, and tell Jane as
No, not at all. But Roseanne, maybe then next you can write a book about how this book has been influencing others, hopefully has had an impact.
Exactly. Let's get, yeah. And exactly, who knows? And maybe it'll be something that is a book that is enacted, or it's a video, or it's something. So who knows? It will be knitted into our lives in some way. Actually, I brought my crochet and my knitting, but I didn't really have time to start. But yeah, I may just need
You know, it's funny that, because this morning I thought, shall I bring my knitting? I mean, there was actually reference to knitting earlier on. You're going. No, it's okay. Thank you for coming. Thank you so much. Do you know Jane?
No, I haven't met Jane.
Let me. No, not at all. And Roseanne is, you know, we almost daily in contact, so not a problem at all. So let me introduce you, Jane. Roseanne, Sumaya, Norma, I'm saying goodbye. Simon, I'll see you later. Mwah.
Bye. Take care, Karen. Bye. Bye, everybody.
So she said, my co-leader, we are both responsible for the innovation. And but also we are both in the gentle, so that is the global innovation